to go over a quick review of that Wolf at the Schoolhouse door for you. I think the strategy you have is the best, is to say that the book just really shows that there's a big disconnect between maybe some of the people sitting around the table and those that you're representing for the rural areas, and also for sort of that blue majority in the province. So if I was looking at how I would approach that, that'd be one of the things I would say. How I would phrase that might be, I just worry that this book exemplifies a huge systemic bias in education. What the book seems to do, that you picked up on, it was really obvious, is just say, hey, this is the moral view. Anything that doesn't say that we need to sort of follow progressive tenets is a bigot, and everything else racist and doesn't care about the poor. And that's just so obviously wrong, it's not funny. And so I would just say that is the thing that takes for granted how it presents, how it doesn't understand the other side, just shows that there's a huge bias. It doesn't mean that the information in the book isn't correct and isn't valid for discussion. It just means you have to take some of that stuff with caveats. So how I would phrase that would be, hey, I like the book for the data about online education, and how that may be sort of something people can get tricked into thinking it's a good thing and educationally valid for students. It's good for some students some of the time if they're able to do well in it. But the school choice, if it just heads down that road, I think it would have a lot of the detrimental effects that the book says that data seems good. In terms of the stuff on the school choice, the charter schools, private schools, it's hard to get too much information that you can rely on just from this book, just because the book seems to be overly polluted. It means the data that he's presenting is useful for discussion, but until you get it balanced with some other side, you're never going to have a valid discussion. You just don't know what there is, and you're going to be arguing against positions from a place without a balanced perspective. And so I think that diversity of voice in terms of the charter and private schools is going to be important to get. Don't make too many decisions at a provincial level until you get some more balance on that side to understand where the other side is coming from. And I think that's the point 3 here. Point 3, but people are leaving public education for a reason. If we delude ourselves into thinking it's just because they're bigots, we're being naive. What do they want? Are we even in a position to know what they want? Have we heard their voices? And I think you need to treat that community as a marginalized group, even if it may seem like it's a big percentage of the population. From the data from the homeschool that I've studied over the decades, is that group does seem like it is being marginalized. And you want to say, hey, if you're going to do a study, don't get someone from the outside that's just going to reinforce sort of bigotry. How would you approach this if it was a racialized group? And so I think you need to get that across as a major point. So I worry this exemplifies systemic bias. I like the data on the online school, the stuff on other school choice. Let's hear some more. People are leaving education for a reason. Let's find out why. I don't think it's just money and they want to destroy the systems. I think you'd also want to get a fourth talking point, which would be, how do we respond to the unbundling of education? In my zone meetings with all the other people from the South, a lot of the alternate and online principals were there, and they're saying it's hammering them in schools all the time. Hey, we want this class online, we want this face-to-face. Hey, I want this support. I don't want too many classes in my school because I'm just too anxious during the day. We're getting hit by that lots. So I think that unbundling of education is inevitable. And when we look at what's happening with people wanting to leave the public system, why do we have to have this big curriculum that covers everything and says, hey, it's either sort of orange bubble thinking or it's blue bubble thinking? That one size fits all and forcing them into that the book says, hey, we should do because, hey, my views are right and education is just too valuable to allow anybody else, isn't going to end well. It will always end with a back and forth. So if we can't pull back on what we expect everyone to do in public education, we've got too many sacred values, and that's an obvious sign that you're taking it almost like too much like a religion. If you can't give something up in order to meet the needs of a diverse population, look to see if you're in a cult. So I would have the discussion, what could we give up to meet the demands of people on both sides of the spectrum to make them happy? How do we pull off an Edmonton model that has the charter schools, but it's still under that public auspices? And I think the solution to that is to really say you have to pull back your curriculum. You have to pull back certain aspects of this wraparound school philosophy. Now, that doesn't mean it gets given up provincially. It just means if you can't pull back, you are in a trap, and that's a clear sign. So pull back to a central core that can enable everyone from a diverse population to accept, and then allow that specializations to happen. Now, normally we would say those specializations would create the charter school, and then you have this mass exodus. Doesn't seem to be what happened in Edmonton. And I think with the unbundling, you could probably just have a core aspect of the curriculum that everyone's expected to know that is agnostic with respect to belief, wokeism, progressivism, conservatism, all those political sides, and then allow the specialization in each of those areas. So then your school board gets choice in this sort of peripheral elements that are always going to be contentious. And you might say, well, what happens if we leave out something that's important to marginalized communities in there? And I think we have enough of a broad-based information spectrum in society that isn't as issue. These people, anybody can self-organize. I could have a Christian group that self-organizes around a Bible study. I can have alternative sexualities organizing in terms of groups. And so we know that organization can happen. What's going to be sensitive would be the extra pieces of the curriculum that are laden with moral values, like the one that we currently have with the social studies that was so disliked with regards to teaching about different sort of religious histories and traditions, as well as one on the previous curriculum that was also disliked in terms of its moral implications and sort of those aspects. So you might have to have basically like the social studies and say, here's the progressive version of social studies. It's got the core. Here's the extra stuff that embeds into it. Here's the Christian version of social studies. You've got the core that's common. Here's the extra stuff that embeds into it, and allow that choice and allow the school boards to make those decisions. So I think the required actions you have to get out of this meeting is, first off, you have to get them to commit to research on the question of why Albertans, especially on the right, are leaving or tempted to leave public education. And I've got some of the homeschool data from down before. Basically what it is parents feel like they can make a difference if they want to get involved with their students. Then they want to make a difference that only they can do. So what's that extra bit that they're trying to provide? And if you say it's, hey, I just don't like the religion in the school and I'm a religious extremist, you're utterly naive. That is not what the data shows. Despite what you may see on the surface. So look into that. I would also think you'd want to get one more piece to get some balance in there. Hey, this was a great book. I wonder what the other side says. Here's the issue with people thinking that school is now almost like a religious indoctrination. Now, that's really offensive to a lot of people on the table, but that's the perspective on the right, is they are viewing it as, hey, you are just like forcing me into this particular religious belief, and I'm going to have the sensitivities and reaction to it. So understand that. The one thing I think summarizes that is actually the James Lindsay. This is a bit of a loaded statement, but it's the sort of easiest to understand podcast of his, and one that isn't the most loaded. And that would be critical education violates the First Amendment. So that's what I would suggest. Review. Book exemplifies systemic bias in education. Just the fact of how it's presented and what it takes for granted, and probably the reactions around the table. I like the data on online education. I think it's something we should worry about. The stuff on school choice, let's get some more information to find out what's happening. Let's get some other balance. Is the issue just choice? And I don't think it is. And so that's 3, is people are leaving for a reason. Let's talk to them, find out. They seem to be a marginalized community from my experience with them. And then the 4th is, if it isn't just let's leave it all together, but with school choice happening and being able to leave bits and pieces, how do we plan for that future to keep everything under the umbrella of public education? Very much like the Edmonton model as opposed to the Calgary model.